Hi, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Please feel free to subscribe, like, and comment, even if it's just an emoji, so that we can get the algorithm going for me, because you know they don't like to put Black people at the forefront of the algorithm. So I would appreciate that. I always put my socials usually in the link in my bio at the bottom, so click that for my Twitter, Instagram, etc. Plant update. I always like doing a little plant update because my plants be growing a lot from video to video. So this is her. I think this is a Majesty palm. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is a Majesty palm. She growing, she thick, delicious. It's winter, so some of my plants are actually struggling, but I'm not going to show them on camera because when I mean struggling, I mean one of them is practically dead, unfortunately, and she was really cute. But these are still thriving. I think the one that almost died, I forgot what it was called. Oh, Akalatunde. That one's almost dead because I think I watered it too much. And they like humidity, and my room in the winter gets cold, so I don't think she really liked it. I'm gonna try see if I can revive it. I don't know if I can. The last plant that I have, I'm just gonna show you. Here, she growing. She's there, you know. Oh my god. Today, I'm going to actually be talking about anxiety, fixed structures, I'll explain what that means, and flowing with water. So I've had anxiety since I can remember. Literally, I think the first time I've had like an experience with anxiety that I can remember is I was like really young, probably like no, I think even whatever age you are in second grade. I remember always having friendship issues, and when I would have friendship issues, I would get super anxious and I would like cry and I would be frustrated about it. So literally, since I can remember, I've always had anxiety. Yeah, oh my god, my hands are so ashy. Hold up. Anyway, child. Okay, so yes, since I can remember, I've had anxiety like since really young. And I don't think like when I went to middle school, you know how they have social workers. I went to middle school in New York, so they had social workers there, and I would meet with the social workers, and he was like, yeah bro, like you have anxiety. And I was like, oop. Okay. So since then, like I had like an actual, you know, diagnosis, and since then, even with other therapists that I've had, like they're like, you have anxiety. But it's interesting because there's multiple different like symptoms of anxiety, and people do multiple different things to cope with it. I feel like my sophomore year of high school completely transformed the way that my anxiety presented itself to me. So I feel like before sophomore year of high school, I had anxiety. I would be anxious about, you know, what people thought about me, or I would overthink about how I was presenting myself in a space, or repeating orders on a menu, you know, typical anxiety stuff like that. But sophomore year of high school, I got super depressed, and it was so weird. Depression exhibits itself very differently based off of who you are, and even if you have other mental conditions at the same time. So while I was really depressed sophomore year of high school, I also had anxiety. Usually they come together because they're best friends. If you watch Big Mouth, anxiety mosquito and the depression cat are besties, and that's so accurate. So for me, when I had depression, my anxiety would just literally like complement my depression. Like it would just make everything worse. So every time I had a depressive thought, my anxiety would like help with the depressive thoughts by adding multiple things I may have missed. When I was super depressed sophomore year of high school, I did not know what to do. I felt like I had no control over my life. It felt like every single person I spoke to, every single thing I did was the end of the world. I wasn't doing anything right. Like I felt like everything I was doing was wrong. Oddly enough, this is gonna sound so crazy because most people who are depressed don't like school, or school is too much. For me, because I was depressed, I noticed that school was the only thing that I could control. So when you're super depressed, you feel like a lot of things are in the circle of your control. For whatever ungodly reason, school, I noticed, was like, I can control this. Like if I work hard, I can get good grades, and these grades make me feel better. So what I did was I literally like I based my entire life on school. So I think that year I got straight A's. Like from an academic standpoint, you would have no idea that I have depression, because I feel like the stereotype of depression is you don't want to do anything. And yes, I didn't want to do things, but it was less like, for me at least, it didn't manifest in the way of like I want to stay in my bed all day and do nothing and school is too much. For me, it was more like I don't want to speak to human beings, because every single time I speak to them, I do something wrong and I'm a horrible person. It was more manifested in a social way that might be as a result of my anxiety, because my anxiety already manifested itself in this way of like other people, I'm like a detriment to other people. So maybe my depression kind of just like, you know, complemented that. So in school, I was like, oh my God, I can't control my behaviors, I can't control my friendships, I can't control my relationships. But school is the one thing that's consistent. Like I noticed it was consistent, because think about it, you get grades, you get feedback, and you do it all over again with new assignments, new classes, final project, midterms, etc. So literally I just threw myself into school. Every time I got a good grade, I felt really good, because I was like, yes, like this is something I'm controlling and I'm like getting a positive result out of. So obviously looking at that is very like, wow, that's really unhealthy. She based her self-esteem off of school. That's weird. But honestly, I'm really happy that I kind of saw school as like my gateway for control, because honestly, if I never got that, if I never saw that, I don't know how I would have left my depression. For me, I'm lucky, like I was only depressed for like a year, and then I swear to God, one day for the next it disappeared. Like I got on medication and everything, and I remember one day, don't do this, by the way, don't try this at home, kids, but one day, like I think of half of a year being on meds, I said to myself, you know what, I'm gonna try it. What happens if I don't take medication? And literally from one day to the next, I just stopped taking it. I was taking citalopram at the time, I think like 200 milligrams, something small. It wasn't crazy, it was like a little tablet. And the first time I did that, it was bad. The first time I did that, I had only been on it for like 2 or 3 months, and I think I forgot to take it one day, and literally it's like I crashed. Like I was even more depressed than I was before. The second time I decided to not take it was like in July, and literally I was fine. It was so crazy. It's like, it felt as if I, like the next day that I didn't take it again, I felt normal. I didn't feel depressed. I didn't feel super anxious. And honestly, I think the only reason why it worked in my favor was because I was also going to therapy, and the therapy that I was getting was really good. So I had tools to manage my depression and my anxiety, but literally my depression never came back. Since then, I have not been depressed. Since sophomore year of high school, I've not been like depressed like that. So please don't try that at home. You're really not supposed to just stop taking medication. You're usually supposed to talk to your psychiatrist, take smaller doses, and kind of like lower your way down. But I literally was just like, let me just not take it one day. And I was lucky enough that it worked for me. I don't really know why. I mean, everyone's mental habits, mental chemicals that are going on in the brain are really different. But for me, that for whatever reason, it worked. But the reason I'm talking about this is during that time period when I was obsessed with control, because when you're depressed, you don't feel like you have any control. And for me, I also had anxiety, so I became hyper vigilant of what I could control. So it started with academics, but then as I got better, as it got easier for me, the more I got into the rhythm and the flow of controlling my schoolwork, I started applying that to everything else. So I became super hyper fixated on control, because again, like the opposite of feeling like you're not in control is depression. So I became super fixated on what I could control. So when I would hang out with my friends, I was super fixated on dates and times and location. So like, where are we going? When are we going? How is it happening? If things went off, I would like be really upset, and I would be really anxious and frazzled, because I kind of created this pathway or mentality in my mind like, oh, I need to know things, or I need to be in control so that I can feel good, because I had created this connection. Like honestly, at that time, control literally helped me exit my depression. Even if it wasn't the healthiest thing in the world, I honor and respect my old self for thinking that control was the way out, because in some weird twisted form it was. I think oftentimes when we look at our old patterns of behavior, we shame ourselves and we're like, oh my God, why did she think that that's so stupid? But I think it's more productive if we honor those old parts of ourselves, because the reason why we behave that way usually is because we genuinely think it's gonna help us. So rather than me sitting here and being like, that was so dumb of me and I should have never done that, because then I became this super control freak. At that time, I saw no way out. Literally, it felt like I was dying every day, and that was the only thing that saved my life, essentially. So rather than me sitting here being like, I'm dumb, blah blah blah, what I can say is I honor that part of me, but that part does not benefit me anymore. I can say goodbye to that. Like, I don't need that anymore. So I think it's much healthier, because you kind of give your old self love, you're giving your inner child love, you're giving your old self love for honoring that part of your past. So yeah, that's why I choose to say that. But anyways, so I became super controlling with everything, essentially, like dates and times. I'm also a really literal person, so when people tell me they're gonna do things and then they don't do it, it really upsets me. I mean, I do like my time being respected regardless, but again, when I was operating in this mindset of control or I need to know, it upset me more than the average person. Like, I was really frustrated. Like, if someone did not do something and they said they would do it, I would get super frustrated, because the way that I led my life was I do everything I say I do. I do everything I say I do. If I don't do it, I communicate it. I'm super like hyper fixated and controlling of what I do, when I do it, why I'm doing it. So I think it kind of surprised me that other people don't lead their lives like that. Like, they're not super controlling. And the reason why I was, again, is because it saved my life. So I've been operating in that mindset from like sophomore year of high school up until the past 2 months. So imagine constantly operating in this sense of like, oh, I need to get this done and get this done and get this done, and then super like hyper fixating on those things and then getting them done, because again, those things do help me, but the problem is I was doing it too much. Everything needs to be done in moderation. There's this expression that says like poison is quantity. So if you're doing something too much or doing something too little, it can kill you. So my ability to be hyper organized or to be in control isn't inherently negative. What is negative is if I'm doing too much of it to the point where it's interrupting my life or my friendships or relationships, and it was. So I think now it's like a matter of applying those things when necessary, and that's when my lesson that I learned comes into play. For the first time in my life, I would say, since I was a kid, because again, of anxiety I would attribute it to, I've learned how to go with the flow. I've never ever been able to go with flow. Like, if you think about me, you won't think, oh, she can go with the flow. Like, yes, I can have fun, and I love having fun. I like being the life of the party. Again, I'm very extroverted, but in terms of going with the flow and just vibing and just like being there, I used to hate it. There's different connotations with going with the flow. Again, moderation is important. When I would see examples of people going with the flow, I saw the extreme end of that. So people who did not care about their lives, people who were really passive and let people step on them, people who had no authority, who were not assertive, who looked directionless. So because every single time I saw people like that be like, I'm going with the flow, I thought that going with the flow was a bad thing. I was like, why would I want to go with the flow when I'm sure of myself and I know what to do? Whereas now I realize that's just an extreme version of what going with the flow is, and everyone should have some type or amount of going with the flow. Now I know that going with the flow is kind of like, is moving like water. So water, for example, in a stream, right? If there's rocks in the way, water will go over, under, or through. It won't pause and be like, you're in my way, why are you in my way, can you please move? Or it won't be upset that the rocks are in the way. They will literally just pass through. So that's like what I have been learning recently to do, and it's been incredibly hard because, again, it's kind of like the antithesis of how I've been leading my life for a really long time, but I love the benefits of it that I've been receiving. So I'll kind of just share like what I've been doing to master that, because I feel like people say things all the time. Like, people will say, oh, just go with the flow, but what does that mean? What does that look like? That's a very vague expression. I feel like people talk about go with the flow a lot, but never really explain what it means. So for me, what I did was, from like a spiritual perspective, is I would literally pray to the water every day. So every night I would take a bath and I would say to the water like, oh, water, I allow you to take my fixed structure. So what I mean by fixed structure is kind of what I was saying before, like the need to have structure always, all the time, to be super fixed, to be super hyper controlling and not move. So like a rock, essentially, just like really fixed and like non-moving. So I would say to the water like, oh, I allow you to take away my fixed structures because it no longer benefits me. So you can take it away. And then I would also say like, oh, I pray to the water and hope that I can be as free flowing and as free moving as water. And I would just say that and like say things similar to that to the water, and just like allow myself to be in the water and feel the water, feel how the water feels on me, because water is a healing property. So I would do that like basically almost every night, every other night. But while I was doing that, I was also doing internal work. A big thing that people, I feel like, misconstrue about spirituality is like you just do the little herbs and prayers and that's it. No, like you also have to do healing work and the psychological aspect of things. What I did after that was I got into a whole bunch of like frustrating situations, I think the whole month of December. And I literally had to learn how to let go. I've never been able to do that. In the past, I probably would have been mad, I would have yelled, I would have been like, this is not fair, I don't like this, da, da, da. But I learned how to flow. Another thing I was doing that really helped is gratefulness. So every morning when I shower, I say what I'm grateful for into the shower. And I don't just say, oh, I'm grateful for a house, I'm grateful for food. Like I have an emotional connection to what I am grateful for. And if you're struggling with that, Kemi actually told me about this. Kemi is my spiritual advisor. I will put their information also in the YouTube comments, or description. But Kemi was talking about how they were practicing gratefulness and they found themselves like just repeating it. So their therapist told them like, when you find yourself doing that, ask yourself, why are you grateful for those things? And really like go into it. So I think they like had us ask ourselves like 3 different things about why we were grateful for that thing. So for example, if I say I'm grateful for food, okay, why are you grateful for food? I'm grateful for food because it gives me sustenance and it tastes really good. Okay, so why is sustenance and food tasting good important to you? Like what about that is important? So I would say, usually when I eat food with others and I bond over the experience of tasting this really good food and consuming it. It makes me feel good. So you see how I went from just I'm grateful for food to having an emotional tie connection to it. So I would do that every day. I still do it every day. It's a part of like my discipline. And I noticed that it helped me live in the moment. And another, I feel like, component of flow is living in the moment. If you're constantly living ahead or if you're constantly living behind, there's no way in hell you're gonna be able to go with the flow because you're either too far ahead or too far behind. So being able to practice what I was grateful for helped me in those situations where I need to go with the flow. Because before, I wasn't necessarily practicing gratefulness. I was just living my life and going from A to B. If you practice gratefulness, like it forces you to slow down and look at what you're doing right now. So I remember one of the things that was driving me crazy was my MacBook. I was struggling with my MacBook from the end of November until the end of December. So I noticed that every time I would try and charge my MacBook after I updated to Big Sur, it magically was not charging. I would have to run diagnostics and it would magically charge. So I went to the Apple store the first time. They were like, oh, we'll replace your battery for free, blah, blah, blah. They checked my charger. They said my charger was fine, right? They fixed my computer. I get my computer. I noticed that the battery, because the battery level wasn't working either, like it was being weird. It was dying really fast, like in an hour. So I noticed that the battery was fixed, but when I went home to charge, literally I went home, plugged in my charger, it did not work. And in that moment, I could have been like, oh my God, I just checked to this Apple store. They charged my charger. This is not working. I'm so mad. I could have done that, but instead, I thought it was kind of funny, and I was grateful that my MacBook did not die during finals, because this issue was happening at the beginning of finals, but when I would run diagnostics, the charger would work, right? So that's what I would have to do. And I remember like saying to my ancestors, like, okay, please, I hope my MacBook does not die before or during finals. Like, please, at least, like, give me that, right? Literally, I finished typing my essay, and that's when my computer stopped working and I had to take it to the Apple store the first time as soon as I finished my final. And I remember, I wasn't mad. Like, yes, I was a little bit frustrated. Like, I wasn't just happy-go-lucky, but I noticed that my level of frustration was completely different than it would have been 2 weeks beforehand, because this was like the middle of December. So I noticed, like, I was like, you know what? This is so hilarious that it stopped working as soon as I finished my essay. I'm grateful that it did not finish during finals, because honestly, if my computer like stopped working during finals, I think I would not have had as much composure. But I was just happy that, like, I guess this is a frustration, but at least my finals are over. So practicing gratefulness, like in a structured manner for multiple days, helps you practice gratefulness in general for life. I feel like people in general are resistant to practicing gratefulness because we kind of take it for granted. We're like, oh, I don't need to practice gratefulness, like I'm just grateful for life. But in reality, I think this lesson taught me, like, I was not being grateful in general. I feel like we tell ourselves, like, oh, I say well, I'm grateful for things when I'm in the moment, but in reality we're not, because we're constantly working, we were constantly living, we're constantly doing something. Whereas when I told myself, like, no, every morning I'm going to tell myself I'm grateful for this thing, I noticed that I started being grateful for things in life. So with the MacBook, I was like, you know what, I'm grateful this died after my finals. I don't think I would have ever had that reaction if I hadn't started practicing gratefulness in the beginning of December. Then the second time, so when my computer was working but the charger wasn't working, I went to the Apple store, and I thought they were going to give me a free charger because they messed up. They made me pay for it, and you know how they sell it separately now, so that was like $90 or basically $100 on a charger. And in the moment, I was a little bit frustrated. I was like, really, like, there's no other way? Like, I remember asking the Apple person like questions, and I realized like there was no way for me to get it for free. So again, I remember thinking to myself, I could lose my mind, I could be mad. Like, I've been to the Apple store like twice now, and I think I called Apple like 6 times before they actually got it fixed. And I was like, I could be mad, I could be pissed, but again, I'm grateful that they fixed my battery for free, and that all I had to do was pay for the charger. And that one was really hard. Like, when I tell you, like, that saying that I was grateful for that was so hard, because that is something that I think most people would have been really mad about. But I was just like, I'm grateful that the battery was fixed for free, and that all I had to do was pay for the charger. And I told myself, like, at least now I know that my MacBook is fixed, like there's not going to be another problem. And since then my MacBook has been fine. But I just remember thinking, like, I gave myself the credit. I was like, I have not responded this gracefully or this maturely, I guess, about issues ever. Because before, if slight inconveniences were happening that often and that quickly, because again, like, literally the whole month of December I was having this issue with my MacBook, I probably would have lost my mind. And also I was going through other inconveniences at the same time. So my MacBook and then other problems I was going through in my personal life all at the same time. So I feel like in the past I would have been really mad and been like, oh my god, why is my life doing this? I don't have any sense of control over what's going on. Whereas this month, because of practicing the gratefulness and like praying to the water, I was like, you know what, it's okay, it's okay, that's life. I think the last thing that really helped me like succumb to water or just flowing with the nature of life or whatever is a story that Kemi actually told me. And this story comes from a book that they read. I'm gonna put the name of the book in the description because I don't remember right now. But basically it's this story about this girl, right? She goes to like live with these indigenous people for about like 2 weeks. So every day they have to put the kayak like on their head and like walk to the water with the canoe, or I think it was a canoe, with the canoe. So every other day, or every day practically, she drops a canoe. And every time she drops a canoe, the indigenous people laugh. They're like, ha ha ha, this is so funny, ha ha ha. So I think the third or fourth day, she dropped her canoe, and then she gets mad. She's like, oh my god, I keep dropping my canoe. And then she was like, wait, why do you guys laugh when I drop my canoe? Like, we laugh because it's funny, like when you drop your canoe, like that's life. Like that's a sign that you're like living life. That's a sign that mistakes occur. When they told me that story, I remember being so shook, because Western society does not allow us to be happy or grateful about our mistakes. Like, we're not allowed to be lighthearted about mistakes. It's a very serious manner. Western society is very much point A to point B, modernization or technology. Like, we're not allowed to make mistakes, especially like in this capitalistic society. Like, mistakes are bad, mistakes are bad, mistakes are bad. Even in school, mistakes are bad, mistakes are bad, mistakes are bad. Like, that's kind of the ideology or the ideas that we're consuming unconsciously. So to hear that story, it just felt so redeeming. I was like, wait, what? Like, our mistakes can be good things. And then what I did was I sat down and I thought about all the times where I was rerouted in life or I made a mistake and how it benefited me. And I like took my diary and I wrote on the left side like the mistake, and then on the right side how it benefited me. And I realized if we never had those mistakes or reroutes, we would have never gotten that new thing or learned that lesson without them. And that made me feel grateful and happy, and I actually laughed, and I decided to tell myself, I was like, you know what, anytime an inconvenience occurs, I'm going to tell myself, oops, I dropped my canoe, and I'm going to laugh. So that's what I've been doing. Like, I stubbed my toe, oops, I dropped my canoe. That's hilarious. That's a sign that I'm alive. Like, I made a mistake. I'm a human being. There's no way on earth that anyone is perfect, right? So I think that's like a beautiful thing, that we're able to live life and make mistakes. Like, that's a sign that we're alive. That's a sign that we're human. That's a sign that we're imperfect, and like, that's okay. I'm honestly, I think, still surprised because I just like did this lesson. Of course, I'm still going to have to learn to go with the flow throughout the rest of my life and still practice doing that. But literally the month of November, I would not have had the same reaction that I had the month of December and now early January. If you told me that I would have had these issues with my MacBook and all these issues with my personal stuff, and that I handled it this well and this calmly, I would not have been able to understand how that's even possible. I've been trying to learn patience for years, and that's another thing I learned with this lesson is intention. Oh my God, I feel like people underscore intention so much. For example, with this lesson, right, with going with the flow, the reason why I think I was able to master it now versus in the past when I was trying to master patience and it didn't work is because of what I was thinking. So the first time I tried to master patience, I told myself, I need to master patience because my friends and family don't like it when I get frustrated at them and I'm a bad person. That's what I was thinking. I was like, let me master patience so I'm a good person again, and then my friends and family like me. That's not productive, because now my intention is I need to do this so I'm not a bad person. That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself, and it's not doing it for yourself, you're doing it for other people. The second time I tried to master patience was in August, and I said, I need to master patience with others. I'm too snappy. I just need to master patience with others. It did not work. Then one day I realized, it kind of hit me on the head. I was like, oh my God, the reason why this shit is not working is because I don't have patience with myself. And I was so shocked. I was shocked. You guys don't even understand. I was so shocked. I was like, this whole time I've been trying to master patience for others, or trying to be patient with others or for others, just to realize I'm not patient with myself. How on earth am I supposed to be patient with other people if I have never shown myself patience, if I've never given myself grace to make mistakes, to fumble the bag? Like, there would be no way. Like, how am I? It's kind of like expecting a baby who does not know how to walk to teach another one to walk. Like, they both don't know how to walk. How am I supposed to teach this person something I don't know myself or have not shown myself? So the intention changed. The intention now became, I want to show myself grace and patience. And that's how I was able to start my go with the flow journey. And that's how, little by little, I have seen myself become more and more patient with my friends and with my family. But right now, I think the emphasis is on myself, because all those examples, all those inconveniences that were happening to me in the past, I would have never given myself grace. I would have found a way to blame myself. I would have found a way to be upset. It just would not have worked. So now that I'm properly like showing myself, like, this is what grace looks like, this is what patience looks like, this is what going with the flow looks like, then I'll be able to take that lesson, take that intention and apply it to others, because I learned how to do it for myself. There was no way I was going to be able to just magically learn patience for others if I couldn't do it for myself. Like, that's really hard to do. The last thing I will say about going with the flow, and I think this is the trickiest one, is balancing going with the flow with being assertive. Because again, as I said before, most people think going with the flow means you're the passive one, you just sit there, you take everything that people give to you, you don't cause trouble. That's not what going with the flow means. Going with the flow is, again, like being like a river. So rivers are also capable of drowning people. It's kind of like water knows how to be assertive. The ocean knows how to protect itself, right? It causes destruction. I feel like it's the same thing with us. Yes, we should go with the flow, but that does not mean that we should allow people to step over us or that we can't be assertive. So if someone disrespects me, I'm not just gonna be like, oh, if it's someone I'm close to, does something that I don't appreciate, I'm not necessarily going to be like, oh, I'm just going to go with the flow, because that person now does not know that they did something that was disrespectful to me. So I will let them know, and I will be assertive and be like, oh, this thing that you did was disrespectful. I don't like it. Please don't do it again. That way they know moving forwards. Whereas, let's say someone on Twitter is like, Serena, you're a terrible person and I don't like you, and tweets that, right? For me, I'd rather choose going with the flow, because me being assertive with that person, with someone I don't really know, is not going to benefit me in any way. So I feel like it's more about learning when to choose, pick and choose your battles. And this is still something that I'm learning. I think they work together, like they work in concert, and it's more about the outcome. So am I being assertive for the sake of being assertive, or am I being assertive because I want to improve this relationship with this other person so that we're on the same page? Am I going with the flow so that I can be passive and be avoidant and use it as an excuse to not assert myself? So do you see the difference? Like, I feel like it's really easy to pick one or the other as an excuse or as a scapegoat, rather than choosing them or one of those options as something that will benefit you. So I feel like it's more looking at what value do I choose in this moment that will be beneficial to me, rather than necessarily being like, only go with the flow or only be assertive. Like, it's about balance. Literally, like what I said before, I think it all goes back to the poison is in the dose. Too much or too little. So you kind of have to gauge that. And that's something I'm still learning. But yeah, I'm so grateful. Isn't that ironic? I'm so grateful, but it's true. I'm so grateful that I was able to learn how to be graceful with myself, patience with myself, and how to go with the flow with myself, because now I can do it with others. And again, my intention wasn't to do this for others. I did it for myself. But now I can apply it to other people. So I'm really happy I learned that lesson, and I'm also really happy that I could share that lesson with you, because I don't think a lot of people talk about like that weird middle ground of go with the flow but also being assertive. I feel like people are really either are like be assertive, or are like go with the flow. Like, people don't really talk about how we need to use both of them in order to enforce our boundaries and also make sure that we're not causing drama all the time because we're only being assertive. So yeah, that was my lesson, my little chat. I feel like, again, I usually just come on here and talk about a lesson I learned, and just hope you guys like it. If you have any suggestions for me about what I should talk about, please leave them in the comments, please. I would love to see what you guys think, what you would want to hear more from me, what you don't want to hear from me, just advice, etc. And yeah, have a good day.